Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Safari Pedal Show. I'm your host, Abby. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Safari Podcast Zoo Crazy Thing Wild Bandwagon. It's great to have you. Today is both a very exciting and very educational day. I don't know why I'm holding my hands like this. It looks very serious, so I'm gonna put them down. It's a very exciting and educational day. As I said before, Marcela, Rada, who we will welcome into the Crazy Safari Pedals verse world in just a moment, is going to be on the show. We're going to be discussing ways to improve recordings that are done from your house, from your bedroom, wherever you are, little things that can add up and make a big difference, and just in general, mistakes she sees new producers and engineers making that she'd like to call attention to so we can all learn more and be better. And I'm just super pumped about this episode because if you have tuned into the show before or in the past, we used to record the show out of the Safari Pedal studio and then made the transition to record it here out of my home setup. And this is the place that I spend most of my entire life. I'm just kidding. But I do spend a lot of time here producing, mixing, editing the show. I also kind of live here, so I guess living as well. And I do record things from my house pretty often, and I have a lot to learn. I'm new to the game, so I am looking forward to learning more and getting better, and I feel like I've kind of summed up the intro, so guys, please give a very warm Safari welcome to Marcela Rada.
Yay!
Yes! Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Same here. Thank you so much for hopping on. I really appreciate it. Before we dive into today's episode and talking about recording at home, etc., let's start with who you are, what you do, and I guess we'll take it from there.
I am Marcela Rada. Who am I? I am a recording, mixing engineer, educator, researcher, PhD candidate. I'd leave it at that.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know, what kind of, got you into audio in the first place?
Well, I fell in love with audio in my childhood. I was about 6 years old, and I remember this moment so well because it kind of marked the beginning of this. My mother had a field recorder, and I found it, and it was like one of those cassette field recorders. And I started, I figured out how it worked and that it could record things and then you could play it back. And that was like my favorite toy as a child. I started kind of falling in love with recording sounds and getting creative with that process. Later on, I just kind of really fell in love with music, listening to music. I would record myself singing. I found out as a teenager that performing was not what I was going to do. And I started getting really into the technical side of things. So the technical part, I kind of discovered when I was about 12 years old. It was because I was looking into Dream Theater, the band. And I was so curious to know where they met. I don't know why. I just thought, I was listening to this band at the time and I kept thinking how do you become this kind of musician? And so I was reading about them and I realized that they all went to Berklee College of Music. I looked into Berklee and I was reading about what you could study there. Mind you, I was 12 years old and I was already preparing for university. So I've always been extremely academic. I love school. And so I looked into what you could study there. And one of those programs was the music production and engineering program. And I read about what it entailed and I discovered what a sound engineer does. When I read that, I made the decision. I was like, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And ever since I've been preparing for that technically.
Well, so it was kind of love at first sight, you can say.
Yes, I feel that I definitely was born with this interest.
I guess on that note, diving into our topic, which is recording and more kind of specifically recording at home. Going in also more into the end of starting out, are there common mistakes that you see new producers and engineers making when it comes to approaching recording and things that you'd like to call attention to and kind of bring up?
I think, and not just for new engineers, but for musicians that are recording themselves. So this goes for everybody that is recording in some way. whether it's to record their own music or trying to learn it to do it professionally. This is something that a lot of people overlook, and it's ear training. So because people focus on learning to use the tools and the equipment and then press and record, and if you got signal, great, you did it, and getting signal is already a whole process, a learning curve. So let's say that you've done that and that you're good and that you're recording. This has nothing to do with knowing how to use the equipment, but really training your ear to identify issues in their recording. What happens a lot, and I get this from recordings from, artists that send me their stuff, or new students, young students, and is that they can't hear the problem. They don't hear the problem because they haven't trained their ears enough to hear it. And so that is something that nobody can really teach you or give you a guide, but that's something that comes with time and experience. But also you got to be aware of what you need to learn. So comparing, like very clean recordings with recordings that have artifacts, and that could be, digital artifacts, or it could be, things in the room. So being able to hear those issues will then allow you to change what you need to change to fix it before you record. This would be my number one advice to everybody who's starting to record, and is that after you learn the technology and you got signal in your recording, you really need to focus on training your ear so you can hear those issues. So when someone says me something, I can immediately pick up what's wrong with it. It's hard for me to describe and tell you exactly what's wrong if you can't hear it. And it takes a lot of time. So I don't expect first year student to be able to hear things that I hear, of course. The idea is to be aware that you got to put the work, so then you can train your ears so you can hear those things. A lot of people think that the technical ear training is only for mixing, that you are going to be able to hear certain frequencies and then use your EQ to boost or cut, or be able to hear distortion when you're compressing or limiting. It's not only that kind of ear training, which is of course crucial, but also the ear training that comes with recording.
It's also interesting, like how, like a lot of what you're talking about are kind of like preventative things. So it's about building the skills to like get the right material going in. And I guess this applies whether you're at home or in a studio. It's about like having that ability to avoid, I guess, the mix nightmares after. Mm-hmm. Do you have any kind of, on that note, tips for people that don't have access to a big studio? Do you kind of have like some basic do's and don'ts if they want to start recording in their own house? I guess kind of going back maybe to the things that may seem obvious, but just like a few pointers.
I think if you want to start recording at home, I mean, it depends. If it's for your own music, you're recording your own music at home, I would recommend renting a few microphones for a day or two if you can. A couple microphones that will give you maybe different results. Read about the microphones if you don't know that. And also, ask for advice. There's lots of information out there when it comes to microphones and what they'll do or how they will respond to specific, frequency ranges, for example. Rent those microphones, bring them home, do a mic shootout. And try and hear what happens when you record through each one of them at home. Have a reference to what you want your vocal to sound. And I'm focusing on vocals, but I mean, it could be any instrument. Compare each microphone to that microphone recording to that reference and see which one is getting you closer to that kind of detail that you want. And doing that exercise of comparing the microphones, comparing to a reference track will help you get a better recording from home, because then you'll be able to know which microphone kind of performs better in the space that you're in. Then it comes to your room, right? And you can read about how to treat your room a little bit, but being in a room that has a lot of furniture already helps a lot. In a room that doesn't have a huge window where, a lot of noise comes through, listen to your room, record, and really, really listen to what's happening in your room. And when you record from different parts of your room, what happens. Like, is that corner sounding different than from this corner? It depends. If I'm looking this way instead of looking that way, what happens? Don't ignore windows. For example, there's going to be reflections coming back from glass. So what happens when I, record looking at the window, and what happens when I record and the window is behind me? Those kinds of things are exercises of recording around the room. And different rooms in the house too will help. But of course, the drier the recording, the better. So avoiding a lot of reflections and refractions.
And having to put soothe too on everything after.
And then if you've done everything that you possibly could in the environment, in your natural environment, then at least you know what needs to be fixed, because you were now able to hear it, right? And you know that those things you couldn't get rid of in the recording, but now you can target them after you've recorded. But you got to make sure that you can identify those.
I love what you said about doing a mic shootout from home. Like, again, it's like little things that kind of blew my mind. I never thought, guys, I really never thought to do that. It's like unlocking kind of like those things that may seem obvious, but it's like,
no, I don't think that's necessarily obvious, actually. I think a lot of people get one microphone that someone recommended, and then they just
roll with it,
buy it and start working with it. I think, renting the microphones is an affordable way to try them out before you commit to one, number one. But number two, it's just a great exercise if you want to be able to hear different microphones and their recordings and how they compare to a recording that was made in a professional studio, for example. And you can have access to that. There's lots of libraries on the internet where you can download sessions for free. And a lot of those are recorded professionally, and then you're able to compare with those.
That's awesome. And what I really kind of a huge takeaway from our conversation for me is about, even when I am working from home, creating exercises for myself and not having to be in some kind of formal learning space. Like you said, taking the time, today I'm going to record in all four corners of the room, facing in all the different directions, renting the mics. I really that's a big one that I'm definitely gonna make happen, just to get better, get better ears. Get better ears.
Yeah, train your ears. It's not just about using the technology.
Absolutely. So to kind of sum up the whole topic of recording at home, new producers and engineers recording, do you kind of have any other takeaways or things you want to just kind of sprinkle on top?
Take your time. What I've noticed with students is that they get frustrated with technical year training and the exercises, because it's also if you're using a technical year training tool, those exercises you got to do daily, and they get tiring and they're not fun. And so it's kind of frustrating where you're not getting the results. And, people nowadays want results fast. And that's not really what happens with something like this. So you really got to take the time, put in the work daily. If you're very serious about this, put time aside, do some year training exercises, because it's something that you develop with time, and it evolves as you continue to work and have more experience. So this is not just something that you can do overnight. And don't get frustrated if you're not getting good results doing those exercises right away, because it's going to take time. But if you don't put the effort, then you'll never get there.
That's a great piece of advice. I'm going to be taking that advice. I think everybody should take that advice. Let's do some technical ear training, and we'll know how to use our ears better. So
let's do it. Let's make it a game, and you can make it fun.
It's true. And I'm really looking forward to the mic shootout. I can't wait to test that out.
Awesome. Let me know which mics you use.
I will. Guys, I'll also let you know which mic I commit to and spend money on. You'll get an update as well.
Let us know. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So thank you so much for hopping onto the podcast. This was a great chat.
You're so welcome. This is great. I love that you're doing this.
Thank you. I really learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to applying what I have learned. I can't respect it. I'm in the gym, but I am not flexing. Came from a